Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to this afternoon's press conference being facilitated by the Ministry of Health. My name is Leslie Ann Johnson. Of course, it's so good to be with you this afternoon. If you're joining us on the Channel 22 or Facebook page or in the diaspora, we say a special good afternoon to you. We have with us here Dr. Sean Charles, the Acting Chief Medical Officer in the Ministry of Health. He'll be giving us a COVID-19 update. We also have with us Superintendent Vanny Kerwin, the Officer in charge of Community Relations, and he will be talking basically about the Quarantine Act and reminding the public of the public health COVID-19 regulations. Without any further ado, we will start things off with Dr. Sean Charles. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, all. The Ministry of Health confirms the diagnosis of the 25th positive COVID-19 case on mainland Grenada. This latest case is the first in about 3 months, and it is the first imported case since the full reopening of Grenada's borders on 1st October. The confirmed case is a St. Andrew resident who returned from Canada and who regrettably left quarantine unknown to health officials before he was given the all clear to do so. This is exactly the kind of behavior that puts us all at risk, both on the part of the monitoring bodies and the individual. The ministry continues to employ every available measure to actively monitor and enforce the safety regulations for the protection of all locals and visitors. Understanding the risks involved in reopening the borders, the government has been proactive in training and engaging a comprehensive contact tracing team, including health wardens, which will be crucial in this period as we aim to deploy adequate manpower to combat this pandemic. We cannot emphasize enough how necessary individual responsibility is in this period. While we monitor and police extensively, there will be a few gaps, and the only thing standing between the gaps and the spread of COVID-19 virus is in our island is our individual and collective responsibility. We urge the public to please report any suspicious or unknown violator to us immediately upon identification. We resolve that every case will be dealt with to the fullest extent of the law. No one will be allowed a pass to knowingly put us all at risk. Any such behavior is unacceptable, callous, and deadly. In the interim, we remind that every incoming traveler must book an approved accommodation for a minimum of 5 days to allow for adequate quarantining and testing, and to obtain the results before being given the clearance to enter the wider community. Also, in order to continue being designated as a quarantine accommodation, all hotels must rigorously strengthen their security mechanisms to adhere to our stringent health and safety protocols. This particular individual managed to circumvent the system, but it was clearly a breach in the security arrangements at the accommodation facility. This cannot be allowed. The stakes are too high. We accept that this latest development falls squarely on the shoulders of health officials. We are addressing the gaps in our system that have resulted in this vexing situation. We are also immediately amping up coordination and communication between health officials, the accommodation facilities, and the Royal Grenada Police Force. We cannot afford any further lapses like the one we have seen this past week. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sean Charles. I'll hand you straight over to Superintendent Vanny Kerwin. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Leslie, and good afternoon to you listening and viewing public wherever you are. Grenada, Carriacou, and Petit Martinique, and the diaspora. I'll start by saying, indeed, the news just presented to us by Dr. Sean Charles is very disturbing, and disturbing from different perspectives. In fact, we have been in the media for the last few months, reminding the public of their responsibility under the Act and as how we can keep ourselves safe and keep our country safe. In fact, in our last press engagement on September the 28th, 2020, we focused predominantly on the public health COVID-19 regulations and highlight various provisions of it, including infringement and penalties. As a reminder, these regulations replaced the emergency powers COVID-19 regulation and is now the standard bearing regulation going forward. The construct of this regulation, among other things, speaks to the wearing of masks in public, physical distancing and sanitization protocols for businesses and public transportation, and the requirements for gathering for social events, funerals, and weddings. In this last press engagement, we announced the law enforcement approach towards enforcing the Act and encouraged the public to comply, since compliance heavily weighted in mitigation of the spread of this virus. Therefore, we thank those of you who have taken the advice we provided seriously and have played your part as responsible citizens. However, there are many in our midst who have still refused to wear masks or face covering in public, forcing law enforcement to issue several fixed penalty tickets for non-compliance in the days since our last briefing. It's regrettable we had to do that, but you understand the consequences now of not doing that based on what Dr. Charles has just announced. In fact, only this morning, our commissioner have convened a meeting with senior commanders and mandated stricter enforcement of the protocols, especially for non-compliance for the wearing of masks. Therefore, we will continue to intensify our enforcement obligations, and we will step up ticketing for non-wearing of masks in public, since we have been very tolerant in the past. We have been paying attention to law enforcement responses in the region to their own regulations, and we have seen swift enforcement in St. Vincent and the Grenadines with arrest and court appearance. And only recently, St. Lucia adopted a zero-tolerance approach to enforcing their own protocols, especially as it relates to the wearing of masks. So we are not alone in the RGPF in trying to keep our citizens safe. The region is fighting the fight collectively to ensure COVID-19 virus stays away from the region. Let me talk a little bit about the Quarantine Act, which is another piece of legislation enacted to give parallel effect to the management of the COVID-19 virus, which is the Quarantine COVID-19 regulations. This regulation speaks to the need for accurate information, testing, quarantine, and/or isolation. Non-compliance of these provisions is an infringement under the regulation and carries a fine not exceeding $10,000. And I just want to reiterate that for emphasis. A fine under the Quarantine COVID-19 regulations is a fine not exceeding $10,000. Unfortunately, we have had some violations regarding these particular regulations. You have just heard Dr. Charles make mention of the fact that there were violations. And I just want to go on record as saying that in addition to the case that Dr. Charles mentioned, we have in excess of 3 violations from the Quarantine Act for which we are currently investigating. We assure the public that we are doing everything that we can, and that with the appropriate information in our possession and the relevant investigation that needs to be done when completed, if charges ought to be filed, we will hasten to do that and to bring justice to those who have put all of our lives and the lives of all Grenadians at risk. Violation of quarantine is a serious issue for all of us. However, it is impossible to man every house, every hotel room, or every place of quarantine. Therefore, we are leveraging on technology, including the use of the approved geofencing watch issued by the ministry or to be issued by the ministry, and we beseech public support and public cooperation. However, where there are any confirmed case of COVID-19, there will be an elevated manned security presence to ensure compliance. Law enforcement and the Ministry of Health cannot do it alone. We all have a collective responsibility to keep Grenada and Grenadians safe, and we all must play our part in this endeavor. We thank the public for partnering with us over the last few months, and as we enter this new phase, our enforcement will be strengthened. We will be issuing tickets. In fact, on my way here, the number of operations that are taking place across the country, on the Carriacou, as I was coming here, a number of buses are being stopped and masks being checked for. I urge members of the public, it is against the law to be in public without wearing a mask. I indicated in the last press conference that the fine in a ticketed sense is $350. We want to avoid issuing those tickets, but we have an obligation and a responsibility under the law to enforce it. If you refuse to wear a mask in public, then we will have no choice but to issue you a ticket. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Superintendent Vanny Cohen. Colleagues, so we've heard from both Dr. Sean Charles, the Acting Chief Medical Officer, and Superintendent Vanny Cohen. I understand GBN is ready with their questions. GBN, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Right, go right ahead.
My first question is to you, Dr. Charles. I would like to know the person or 25th case. Was this person involved in any social activities while he was not on the compound he was supposed to be in? There are rumors that the person was part of a gathering or a party. Is there any indication that this happened? Also, to you, Superintendent Cohen, could you tell me, as it relates to the buses, you spoke about having protocol, more stiffening of the implementation of the rules. But what about the solution, the sanitization solution? Are officers or persons in the bus terminal checking to see if the bus operators are doing what they're supposed to? Because I have myself personally encountered where they are not spraying passengers' hands and they are not ensuring that passengers enter the bus with their masks. So what sort of coordination would you be working with the persons in the bus terminal as it relates to that?
Right. Thank you for your question. We have received numerous reports alleging that the individual was present at social gatherings. We are at present investigating these reports, and if individuals are aware that they were present at these gatherings while the individual was there, we urge them to quarantine themselves and contact health officials. The contact tracing process is actively ongoing, and we are pursuing all leads that that reach our desk.
Thank you for your question. I indicated in our last press brief on the 28th of September that we were allowing for education to take place and there were leeway for violators of the regulation. I indicated just a few moments ago that we have stepped up our enforcement. So to answer your question directly, yes, there will be additional presence at the bus terminus. We will be checking for the sanitization and the mask. Even if you leave the bus terminus with or without a mask, you can be expected to be stopped or checked en route to ensure that you're still wearing that mask. And we will be working with the bus terminus officials to ensure that sanitization takes place before you enter the bus.
One more, Dr. Charles, I have a question as it relates to the quarantine facility. There's also talk about one of the quarantine persons or persons in quarantine recently having a situation where their other partner came and came to the quarantine facility and who was not supposed to be there, and they end up jumping out the window and damage your foot. Is this true?
Right. So I can confirm that there was an incident where an individual breached one of our quarantine accommodation in an attempt to meet someone. That individual, in attempting to escape from the facility when a search was being conducted, sustained injuries as a result. That matter as well is under our review.
That's it for now, Rena. All right, let's.
I'll leave other persons to ask questions.
Great. Mikey, good afternoon.
Hi, good afternoon. Now, I want us to go back to the particular case and help us to understand the context of the particular infraction. Was the person aware of their status before leaving the quarantine facility?
So the individual had the sample taken on the morning of the 4th day. The individual left before receiving the result and without the authorization or the clearance of the health team.
Mikey, any other from you?
Okay. In terms of the contact tracing, how widespread is the contact tracing as a result of this particular breach?
The contact tracing operation is as wide as it takes us. We follow every lead to see if there is any validity in the information that is provided. The public has been very supportive so far in providing us with information, and we encourage persons to continue supplying us with information because we will follow every lead, because it is absolutely important that we investigate every angle and every bit of information that is provided to us to ensure that we do not have an onwards negative situation here.
Mikey, any other?
Just one more follow-up question before we move. I would like to have a better appreciation for how did the ministry or how did the authorities discover the breach?
So, upon receipt of the results of the test, we inform individuals individually about their result. And given that there was a negative result, of course, we had to contact the individual to inform him of his negative result. And when we made contact to his quarantine location to achieve this purpose, the individual was not there. Sorry, it's the positive result, sorry.
Okay, Mikey, that's it for you for the time. So we just want to be clear. It's a positive result. It was a mistake. It's a positive result he meant. Mikey, do you have another question?
I'll continue in the next round.
Great. Linda, good afternoon. Linda, good afternoon.
Hi, afternoon.
Right.
I'm here.
Yes, go right ahead.
Yes. My question presently is for Dr. Charles. I don't know if I missed it, but can you tell us whether or not it is a male or a female who breached?
The individual was male.
Okay.
And
Was that person in home quarantine or hotel quarantine?
The person was
And you mentioned that
quarantined.
person is from St. Andrews. Which part of St. Andrews, if we can break it down?
Okay. So as I said, the individual was male. I know I'm going to get asked. He was in his 30s. The individual was at one of our approved accommodations. And the individual was, his address is in Tivoli in St. Andrew.
Is that the confirmed address, or that's the address the person would have given to ministry officials?
This is the address where we went and encountered the individual. All right, this is where he's staying.
You mentioned earlier that the person circumvent the system. Explain to us how he circumvent the system.
All right, so each approved accommodation is required to have security. Everyone in quarantine is required to have clearance to leave the quarantine. He must have found some way to leave without the knowledge of the security at the facility. And in that way, we said that he circumvented the system.
And finally, for now, from me, are there any household presently under quarantine because of that person? And where did you find the person?
Yes, there are households presently under quarantine as a result of exposure to this individual. Can you clarify the question? Where did we find the individual?
Yeah, did you find him in his home, or you found him?
Yes, he was.
Lyman, where was he found upon going to look for him now?
He was found at his home in Tivoli in St. Andrew.
Okay. And the household under quarantine, approximately how much persons are affected by that, and does it involve students?
How many persons are affected? Like I said, the investigation is ongoing. So I do not have that figure for you at present. When we do get that number, we can make it available.
No, I'm speaking about the household that are presently under quarantine because of the person. Is there a collective approximate number of persons who are affected now that are currently under quarantine? Because you said there are households under quarantine. So in this household, approximately how much persons? And does it involve students?
Well, it is not one household. All right, there are going to be many households that are affected. All right, as we get more information and as we identify more contacts, those persons are placed under quarantine. All right, I do not have I cannot give you a number at present. Like I said, the situation is fluid and ongoing.
All right, Linda, that's it. I'll pass on to somebody else. Good afternoon, Tanya.
Yes.
Tanya, good afternoon. All right, is Nancy McGuire there?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, good afternoon. Go right ahead.
The minister had said last week there were some 69 persons on the JetBlue flight that had not registered as an approved accommodation and expected the ministry to respond by checking their homes. I'm just wondering how you handled that. And there are still people from the Air Canada flight that have not received the results of their first tests, and wondering where the loophole there is. Thank you.
All right, I will try to answer that question to the best of my ability. Now, we are faced, it seems, with the majority of these flights with a situation where, and this is something that is seen more, that is seen with basically locals who are returning to Grenada. We are faced with a situation that a large number of locals are simply not adhering to all of the entry protocol. The entry protocol states that you must have a booking for a designated period upon entry into Grenada. This is to prepare for your quarantining and monitoring and testing before going home. There is a large section of the population that is returning that is not obeying this part of the entry protocol. And when they land at our airport, it creates a huge problem for the health officials and everyone else who has to process these persons. Some of these individuals, in addition, are very belligerent and combative, demonstrating very little care for the population, for our local population. This is a situation that the Ministry of Health or port health officials have been battling for months. And it is a situation that we need the cooperation of everyone in to address. So a large number of these individuals are simply not booking, and they are landing here, and their conclusion is, I am here, what can you do? This is not the attitude of someone who is returning here and cares about this country. This is the attitude of someone who has no consideration for all of the effort that was taken to keep this country safe over the past few weeks. And this is a situation that we want the Grenadian family to assist us in combating. This is a situation that simply cannot continue. If you do not care about this country, don't come back. You are not doing us a favor by returning here. All right? If you do not care about this country, do not come back. We want everyone to cooperate, obey the protocols, so that we all can remain safe and we can avoid unfortunate situations like this one. Now, when those persons arrive, our health team has to find a way to book them somewhere. All right? We have to find somewhere to put them. And it creates a very difficult situation for us. All right, in most instances.
So how do we deal? This is a very tricky situation. How do we deal with something like this, Dr. Charles?
Well, if my appeal to the government, to the Grenadian family, doesn't work, I'm not sure what will. We may have to be more draconian in what we do. We may have to be more restrictive in what we allow and in who we allow to land on our shores. But we really do not want things to reach at that stage. We would really prefer persons to be a bit more cooperative. Help us to keep this country safe.
Thank you, Dr. Charles. Nancy, Superintendent comment, is that...
question about those that have not received their results from their first test. When will they get them, and why have they not received them?
Well, if they have not received their results as yet, it may likely be that there were communication issues in reaching those individuals, because all of the results from that flight are in.
Any other? From you, Nancy?
Yes, one more. When you do deal with this case number 25, were officers of the police force involved? And if so, were they dressed in PPE?
Officers of the Royal Grenada Police Force, yes, were involved. They provided support to the health team. Yes, they were wearing PPEs, and of course, the response was led by the health team. All right, which removed the need to have the officers expose themselves on more than what should ordinarily be.
All right, let me just go to somebody else now. Callistra, good afternoon. Callistra, are you there?
I'm here. Are you hearing me fine?
Yes, we are. Go right ahead.
Okay. How will this developing situation affect plans to reopen in certain areas? For instance, the change in protocols at schools and the plan to resume normal sessions. We have a situation here now where we're doing contact tracing. We're worried about community spread as a result of case number 5. How will this impact on some of our opening of various areas? Second is Grenada still confident in its protocols and for preventing the virus to enter our shores, given how easy it was for this gentleman to walk into the community and risk spread? And also, are you considering any changes to quarantine enforcement and monitoring?
All right, maybe I should tackle the second question first, and you remind me of the first question. We are confident in our protocols. It was through our protocols that we were able to identify yet another case. The difficulty is when individuals come in and deliberately take actions to circumvent, get around, not obey our protocols. This is where the challenge comes in. If everyone follows the rules, then we can judge the outcome of the rules whatever results are produced. But when we have persons that are not obeying the rules, and we have outcomes like these, we can't say it's because of the rules. It is because there are individuals who are intent on not complying. Now, with regards to the first question, of course, when situations like this arise, we have to pause and we have to examine and we have to see, we have to wait and see how it evolves so that we do not create a situation where there is more risk for our population. So when negative situations arise, you always evaluate where you are at, where you are going, all right, how long it will take to make the next step, or whether you need to pull back one of the steps that you already took. At present, we are in the early stages of the contact investigation. We continue to monitor and see if, as a result of this irresponsible act, we have secondary cases. We are really hoping that that is not the case, but we are exploring every avenue to see if that has occurred. Once we come out of the observation period, all right, which is in the next 2 weeks, and we are satisfied that there are no further cases have been found in investigating and testing, then we will evaluate and we will say, okay, we can continue with our march to getting this country back to work and getting us back to normal activity.
Just to be clear, somebody's asking.
Also,
Oh, go ahead, Callistra.
oh, thanks. I missed the first part of the news conference. I'm not sure if you spoke on this, but is any action being taken against that individual for breaching the quarantine? Is he being charged with anything? And also, what is the number of people that you've tested already since you realized that there was a risk of spread in the community? How many people have been tested so far, and when will those results be available to you?
All right, so with regards to the first question, yes, follow-up actions are being prepared. All right, with regards to this case. Secondly, with regards to the number of persons testing, remember this case was confirmed yesterday. The testing is ongoing today, so I would not have that number in front of me because the persons doing the testing are out in the field conducting the testing. Once they collect the samples, it goes to a lab. It generally takes between 1 to 2 days for our to receive the results.
Can you explain a bit more? What exactly is the authorities going to be doing regarding this breach?
Well, the individual has breached our quarantine requirement and our quarantine regulation. So whatever legal remedy is in place to deal with such an issue is being contemplated.
That's it, Callistra?
Did he say anything when he was taken, when he was caught yesterday? Did he say anything? Did he give any sort of explanation as to why he did this?
No, he did not volunteer that information.
Okay, thanks. That's all for me right now, Leslie.
Okay, great. Somebody's asking on social media, what measures would be in place to ensure that there's not a repeat case of somebody intruding, or again, like the individual leaving the facility?
So as I mentioned, when things like this happen, it causes us to evaluate where we are and to look and see what we can strengthen. And that is what is occurring at present. As I mentioned, those accommodations that offer quarantine, their security mechanism must be strengthened in order for them to continue to be in a position to accept persons for quarantine.
Mikey, do you have another question?
Hi.
Go ahead.
All right. We have heard a lot about the watches, the tracking watches, the geofencing watches. We have heard about tracking apps, and just so that the general public doesn't have a false sense of security, how has these been assisting the authorities in tracking persons who have committed breaches? Is it effective at all?
All right, so the tracking watches have not yet been deployed. The tracking app is available. I do not have the statistics on how many persons have used it. All right, and how the data that it generated, how well it feeds into what we're doing. All right, so that is basically all I can answer with regards to those two initiatives at present.
That's it, Mikey?
No, I know that you said that the contact tracing is ongoing and so on. Have we isolated school children or any particular school as regards to this particular case?
Well, I am sure that during the process of the investigation, we may find families where there are children in school age and so on. And of course, they will be placed under quarantine just like all others. So I'm sure, yes, that may be the case.
If I may just ask one more question, there seemed to have been a lot of anxiety, Dr. Charles, about Grenada is going to go back under lockdown. Because you see, there are so many questions and still very little answers. So can you help us to understand the ministry's position when it comes to that sort of thing? Is there a criteria that needs to be met before we can say, okay, let us start, in your words, pulling back on some of the steps that have been taken to ease things for the Grenadian population?
At present, I am not aware of any plans to go back into another lockdown. What we should really focus on is how can an incident like this drive home the message to the public that it is necessary to obey the quarantine regulations, to wear your mask when in public, which is there in the regulations, to sanitize, to social distance. I am certain that there are individuals experiencing very anxious, very nervous and frightening moments right now and regretting not wearing a mask. I am sure they would have felt a tad more comfortable if at the time when they were found to be in close proximity to the individual, cares were thrown to the wind. So I hope that an incident like this brings us back to a point where we see the value in simply obeying, and we see the value in stopping resisting. The police should not have to be chasing after loaded buses with no one wearing masks after something like this. Because what if I told you that someone was exposed unknowingly and they're riding in the bus next to you, yet you're not wearing a mask, and that person is not wearing a mask? What would it take for persons to understand that personal responsibility is the most important part of us combating this disease? If you simply choose not to follow any instruction, we cannot police you into the confines of your home and those private places where you choose to hang out. If you choose not to obey and you choose to throw cares to the wind, we could already throw our hands up and say we've lost. Grenada is not an isolated place. You can turn on your news, see what is happening in the international community. This disease is on the comeback. Grenada is not immune. What you see happening there in other countries could very well happen here. And it could hit home very hard. So we hope that this incident would change the mindset of Grenadians going forward. And they would be a little more cooperative with us, because what we are trying to do is to protect you.
Thank you, Mikey. GBN, you have another question?
Yes, I do. My question, I don't know if I missed that, Dr. Charles, because the audio was a bit low on my side, but could you tell me the person's age and if they are presently asymptomatic? And could you tell me how soon will we be seeing the tracking watch coming in? Because I had the impression in prior press conferences, that the watches were already in play. So could you tell me how soon will we be seeing this?
So, try to answer the question. Yeah. So, like I said before, the individual is in his 30s, early 30s. He's male. He reports no symptoms. No symptoms. The watches that that you ask about, the watches are here. Their deployment is inevitable and soon.
Colleagues, anybody else has questions? We're coming up to the 1 hour mark.
Yes, Liz, I have a question.
All right.
Okay, I added a follow-up.
All right, go ahead.
Could Dr. Sean tell us where the person is presently, whether or not they're in home or government facility doing quarantine? Well, he did. My other question was whether or not the person is asymptomatic or showing symptoms. Is there, in initial preliminary inquiry with the person, is there any indication that that person possibly would have been unwell while before coming into Grenada a few days in advance? And my final question for now is this the first person to breach quarantine under that circumventive way that he explained? Or is it the first person that we have been caught to be positive? What the other person who would have lived quarantine but it turned out to be negative? And is he the first person who would have lived but happened to be positive?
With regards to the first question, the individual is in state supervised quarantine facility. Well, I can't remember the second question, but I remember the last. The last question was this the first individual that breached quarantine? No, he's not. He's not the first, and I'm sure he may not be the last. And yes, he is the first that is positive.
My second question was whether in the preliminary investigation is speaking to the individual, whether they would have been sick previously, or is it saying they had no idea that they would have been unwell before?
No, the individual indicated that he had not been sick previously, that he had other tests done and they were negative.
Okay, before I go, has Grenada seen any sign or any reason to believe that persons are coming with questionable results of PCR testing? Is there any indication that somebody might be carrying a fake document?
Well, what I can tell you is that that is something that is of concern not just to us, but other countries in the region. Persons can go to great lengths to falsify documents when they desire to enter another state. That is the reason why we quarantine individuals and we test them after a period of time locally to ensure that their status does remain negative as their PCR states.
That's it for you, Linda?
Yeah.
All right, great. Nancy, you have another question?
Yes, I was wondering if the case number 25 was wearing one of those geofencing watches. And just going back to my question about people that had no intention of going to an approved accommodation, and you anticipate that, you're upset about it. What will you be doing about it going forward? Thank you.
All right. So with regards to the first question, the answer is no. He was not wearing a watch. With regards to the individuals who continue to not adhere to the entry protocols and to entry requirements, we are. You see, every time when things happen, it allows us to sit back and consider what our next step should be. We would like to facilitate travel. We would like that everyone is able to be reunited with their relatives with as much ease as possible. But we do recognize that there are individuals that are intent on making this extremely dangerous. We will continue to examine and see what other resources and what other strategies that we can deploy to ensure that this is not a situation going forward in the future. I know that there are initiatives right now being considered. There is a platform that the Ministry of Health and together with Immigration and so is working on that would allow persons to register, all right, to come to Grenada and to receive a travel certificate which ensures that they have fulfilled our criteria before landing. That is something that is in development, and when it is ready, I'm sure that more information will be provided.
Great, colleagues. We're approaching the 1 hour mark. Anybody else has a final quick question?
I have a quick question, Leslie.
Okay, yeah, all right. Just one at a time, please. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Dr. Charles, you said that this was the first person who breached quarantine and with a positive test, but several months ago something similar happened. A gentleman was able to go through our airport and leave the country being COVID positive. Months later, our system still seems that this guy, he left the country, thank God, but this gentleman now was able to get into our communities. The hole that existed in the system where no one knew that the person had left until they were looking for them to give them the test results has happened again several months later. So it seems like we did not learn any lessons and nothing was changed, which how do we deal? Well, have you looked at that situation where this has happened before, and how do we fix that? And secondly, the facility where this gentleman was and he was able to waltz out and put the entire country at risk, is any action being taken against that facility? Are they still a state-approved facility for keeping people in quarantine?
All right, so I think that you might have been referring to an issue that we had very early in the COVID-19 situation, where an individual had left. I believe it was a similar situation where his results were pending, and he boarded a flight without our knowledge, and then and left the country. The situations, although they have some similarities, are different. At that time, we were in a different place. At that time, we had to wait for samples to come back from Trinidad to give us a confirmation, and it took a bit more time. All right, so that is something that occurred at that time. This time, it is a returning individual who was in quarantine, all right, and breached our quarantine requirements. All right, every situation has its similarities and its differences, and of course we have to deal with them according to their own characteristics. What was the second question? That was the question? Okay, thanks.
Right, there was somebody else voice competing with Callistra's. You have the opportunity to have one final question, and then we'll wrap this up.
Leslie, you didn't respond to my question regarding this gentleman left where he was. Is it still in a facility by the Ministry of Health, given the lack security for keeping people in?
All right. Like I said, all of the facilities that wish to continue as quarantine facilities, they must make efforts to strengthen their security arrangements in order to maintain that status. If they cannot or they will not, that status will be removed.
All right, the final question goes to GBN. Good afternoon. Go right ahead quickly.
Yes, just a final clarification. Dr. Charles, as it relates to the quarantine or the person who is the 25th case, I'm receiving information that the St. Patrick Anglican School students were sent home early because they were affected by this. Can you clarify that? And also that another case might be involved, a person from Mount Ridge who might have left the facility?
All right, so with regards to the school, I don't have the information, so I cannot really comment. Like I say, our contact tracing operations is ongoing. Persons are in the field, so I would have to, once I get, I verify that, then maybe I can give you a more informed answer. With regards to someone else that has breached quarantine, like I say, that is something that I would have to get information on and maybe provide a more informed answer. All right. But I am aware that the individual did not leave by himself. He was accompanied by another family member, and those two we have under observation.
All right, colleagues, thank you so much. We have to wrap things up here. So what I'll do is, Superintendent Cohen, I'll give you the opportunity to say a few parting words, and then the final word with Dr. Sean Charles.
Thank you again, Leslie Ann. What is baffling to us in law enforcement is the fact that over the weekend, we have seen the anxiety on social media. We have seen the panic on social media. But we have been saying for the last few weeks and months to follow the protocols. So even if we have had this situation where this gentleman is positive and has been in the communities, it should not create that panic among our citizens if we would just follow the advice and the protocol as we've been given them by the Ministry of Health. Wear your mask, social distance, and sanitize. Now it is becoming a case where we have to force enforcement and get on the ground and force people to do what they should be doing naturally and willingly in their own safety. So we are doing what we have to do. If you wouldn't do it yourself, we will do what we're being paid to do, which is to enforce the law. And we have started to do that in a very stringent way.
Thank you, Superintendent. Dr. Charles?
All right. Sorry, in ending, all I would like to convey is to the people who are infected, who are affected, sorry. If you think you are exposed to the case, you need to quarantine, you need to reach out to health officials. If you have been asked to quarantine, you need to obey the instructions of the health authorities, all right? And get tested, get cleared. All right. If you have not been, you should not be moving around in society. If there's someone quarantining in your home, the rest of the individuals in the home cannot be moving up and about and into society. All right. If one is quarantined, you're all quarantined. Everyone is required to stay in. We really need the cooperation of everyone if we are to prevent the situation from getting out of hand. And that is all we are asking. Now that we are faced with this crisis, we are really asking the public to cooperate with us and assist us in getting over this new crisis. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sean Charles, Acting Chief Medical Officer, and the Superintendent Vani Kerwin, Officer in charge of Community Relations. We do thank you so much, colleagues. We thank you as well, those of you joining us on the Channel 22 Facebook page, and of course those of you in the diaspora. So as mentioned at the start of this press conference, the 25th positive COVID-19 case, the first that we've had in 3 months. It's a male in his early 30s, and we understand the situation as explained by Dr. Sean Charles. So we need to do what we have to do to ensure that we are safe. Wearing the mask, yes, some people might complain that they cannot breathe with it, but let us think of the problem. If we catch COVID-19, then we cannot breathe at all. I don't think some of us understand the seriousness of this problem. We have to do what we have to do, and as Superintendent Cohen said, if we don't do it, then they will be forced to do what they have to do. So please, let us just comply. If we love our country, let us comply with the rules and the regulations. Thank you so much for viewing. Thank you for joining us. My name is Leslie Ann Johnson. Have a blessed day, everybody. Thank you.